The future of agriculture looks bright. We are here at State FFA. We've grown deeper, meeting some of these young leaders.
We are in dangerous territory.
The farm economy is fragile, and a possible trade war could break some. Plus, tax relief, will it happen? Grow starts now. Thousands of Nebraska's best and brightest descend on the capital city to build the future of agriculture. We are celebrating Nebraska FFA and the young leaders of tomorrow, providing leadership on the farm and ranch, classroom, and beyond. Tonight on Grow, much more on these young ag leaders. But first, Nebraska farmers watch millions disappear in minutes. Are we seeing the first shots fired in a trade war? It's our top story.
The only time I mess with that refrigerator is at the end of the day for a beer.
No such luck this week. It was the morning coffee when Greg Grieving saw his fear realized.
I'm looking at the phone and pouring the water at the same time.
That's when he learned China hit back at the U.S. with a proposed 25% tariff on soybeans. On paper, Nebraska farmers lost $130 million in hours. Markets have rebounded, but the threat of a trade war comes at a time farmers are vulnerable.
American agriculture right now is a very fragile thing as far as financials.
Greg figures the impact on his farm could be in the tens of thousands.
That's what has happened to my bottom line just as a result of one announcement.
If we use it 100%,
In Mark McHarg's hog barn, when the markets go down, the value of his pigs follows.
Just the market move from March till through yesterday was equivalent of almost $300,000 of value if it did that for a given year. And so it's real.
Including the people Mark does, or in this case, maybe does not do business with.
We're looking at remodeling an old barn, bringing on more capacity.
That's on hold, and so are equipment purchases.
And when it gets put on the back burner, there's no money flowing.
Greg Grieving's been an ambassador on behalf of soybean growers.
South Korea, Vietnam, China, the Philippines, Japan, just to name a few.
3 out of every 5 rows of soybeans are exported, 60% of those to China. It's a global market. Greg believes the U.S. still has leverage.
China is still going to need soybeans from somewhere.
Whether or not you call it a trade war, farmers are frustrated.
We are in dangerous territory.
Senator Deb Fischer reacting to the tariff saying, quote, "I've spoken directly today to Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue and White House Legislative Affairs Director Mark Short. In my conversations, I emphasized the significant market loss our producers would face should China's tariffs be finalized," end quote. Senator Ben Sasse calls it nuts. This week he talked with ag leaders here in Nebraska. Paul Gutierrez continues our team coverage.
Our economy is dependent upon being able to feed the world.
When a United States senator shows up in a local community, it's a big deal. This crowd gathered in Bellevue to hear Ben Sasse offer his thoughts about a trade dispute between the USA and China.
A trade war is stupid. A trade war is painful.
At the heart of this conflict are tariffs. After President Trump's administration unveiled plans to put forth taxes on $50 billion in Chinese imports Tuesday, China fired back with its own $50 billion tax plan. Items like soybeans and corn would be impacted.
Nervous, anxious.
Dan Wesley serves as president of the Nebraska Corn Growers Association. He says the uncertainty of a trade dispute is what worries him.
You just don't know if, how long that's going to last.
But not everybody we spoke to today is feeling nervous or anxious about what's going on.
We're just in the beginning stages of all of the negotiations.
Carol Hudkins is optimistic about the future.
I think possibly that President Trump brings out the big guns and then kind of backs off. Said this is what we were going to do, but if we can talk, maybe we can reach some kind of an agreement.
But if an agreement isn't reached, Senator Sasse says that doesn't do anybody any good.
We need the administration to hear clearly from the people who are feeding the world why they want to keep feeding the world, and they want government and their trade wars and their tariffs to stay out of the way.
Senator Ben Sasse took a break from his Twitter fast, saying, quote, Hopefully the president is just blowing off steam again, but if he's even half serious, this is nuts. China is guilty of many things, but the president has no actual plan to win right now. He's threatening to light American agriculture on fire. Let's absolutely take on Chinese bad behavior, but with a plan that punishes them instead of us. This is the dumbest possible way to do this. End quote. And the majority of you saying it does look like a trade war. Only about 20% say no, a trade war will not happen. A few of you are unsure, but about 75% responding to our Twitter poll say we are either on the verge or in the beginning phases of a trade war. Those results are not scientific. And while Nebraska fears a trade war, the state also works to strengthen relations with an important trade partner.
And you are now an admiral in the great Navy of the state of Nebraska. Thank you very much for all your great work.
Nebraska's Navy has a new admiral, Naoki Ito, Consul General of Japan. He visited Nebraska recently. Governor Pete Ricketts says Japan is the state's top foreign investor and third largest importer of Nebraska products.
And Japan is the largest market for U.S. beef and pork. And your state has a trade surplus vis-a-vis Japan. So I'm really hoping that through this conference in September, our partnership, our friendship will further grow.
This fall, Nebraska will have the honor of hosting the 50th anniversary joint meeting of the Midwest-Japan Association. Staying at the state capitol, an 11th hour showdown looms on property taxes.
O says ah.
Classrooms in York have 200 more kids than a decade ago, with 6 fewer teachers. The superintendent says spending isn't the problem. They've stayed about the same level for a decade. What has changed, he says, is the amount of state support.
Go from 3.7 million to 0, and we've had to fill in the gaps with local property taxes like so many other things.
York is part of a coalition with Nebraska Farmers Union that want tax reform, but not as proposed by the governor.
Because it does too little and it takes way too long, and we have a crisis right now.
It is significant relief.
Mark McHarg of Nebraska Farm Bureau says the governor's plan provides relief, just not up front.
It's 20%. I mean, 20% is significant. Yes, it starts out 1%, 2% and builds, but at the end of the day, you take your property tax, reduce it by 20%, that's real dollars.
Some have criticized Farm Bureau for backing the governor. It's actually one of several plans the state's largest farm organization has supported.
We've been involved in almost all the legislation that's working its way through.
The governor's plan was the first one to show any sign it could get through the legislative process. It would phase in property tax cuts for the home and farm, but has failed to gain traction. So the discussion may shift back to school funding, with the possibility of expanding state sales tax to benefit schools.
We are asking for money outside of local property taxes so that we can do a great job with our children.
Now to this week's poll question. How would you rate the legislature's handling of tax reform? Give them a letter grade. Follow GROW on Twitter to cast your vote. Well, as we said, we are here at the 90th annual FFA State Convention, and a teacher from our area honored at the event. The Gary Scharf Helping Hand Award was presented to Mr. Dana Anderson of Aurora for his outstanding dedication as an agriculture instructor and FFA advisor. A student said Mr. Anderson's leadership helped students after the chapter tragically lost a member. Principal Doug Kittle tells me Mr. Anderson is more than an ag teacher and FFA advisor. He's made a career of building positive relationships with his students that last long after they leave the classroom.
I'm Zane Turr from the Wood River FFA chapter, and I won state in the Ag Mechanics competition.
I'm Hallie Sidek from Wood River. I played guitar for state talent this year and last year, and I got my state degree. Hi, I'm Grayson.
And I'm Michaela.
And we're from the Southern Valley chapter, and we
first place in agri-science.